Hello, 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 and welcome back to DLA Alternative. It's your boy Brandon, and I hope everyone is doing phenomenal as always. And thank you, as always, to everyone who has been subscribing, liking, following this journey, and all that good jazz. But I am so excited to finally be back with our first season 5 theory. And yes, I know you guys want to do like breakdowns of each episode, but what we're going to do with these theories is we're going in on every little bit and piece of this season 5 so far, finding connections. I've been analyzing this shit like crazy. You have no idea. I've probably rewatched this at least close to 12 times now. And that is dead ass serious, from backwards, forwards, all of that, okay? And what I've been doing is trying so hard to find these deeper hidden connections to all 4 other seasons, which, if you think about it, is so much time worth of film in actually analyzing. But with my knowledge of this show and my analyzing of this past year, that has helped immensely, let me tell you. And one of the biggest theories, it was actually our 6th theory, okay, was called Kali is the villain, all right? And if you've been a part of this channel, it has been a whirlwind of emotions and wild theories. But some of my first theories, okay, I have ever done have come true, okay? And you might be confused because it's titled Kali is the villain, but the basis of those theories, any theory referred to Kali, was that she will return. And as you know, people, I am so excited to say it. Kali Prasad, our girl number 8, has returned in such a big and beautiful moment, okay? And as you know, I've been so passionate about this character returning, and I could not be happier. So that's why we're going to jump into this one called the Lost Sister Theory. And you might be very confused, but this theory is going to be kind of all over the place and in a best way possible, because what I started picking up on, people, is that if we use the Lost Sister as a reference, okay, not just to Kali, but to just any type of Lost Sister in this show, specifically within this season, we could pick up on hints to some other things that we probably are going to see in the next part of this show or this next volume. But if you've analyzed any of this show so far, okay, if you pay attention to things referred to Hopper and Elle, almost their whole entire journey, you can find some context clues that basically were proving us that we were going to be revealed to Kali in all 4 episodes, okay? So that's what we're going to do here. But what we're also going to do here is we're going to use our other lost sister, okay, being the vanishing of Holly Wheeler, or just our girl, Holly Wheeler, as a reference to finding clues about the lost sister. Because as we know, her vanishing in this season, she is now considerably a lost sister, people. So that's how we're going to do this one. I hope you guys like this one. I am happy to be back. I'm excited to be analyzing new stuff. Let's get right in this, and I hope you guys like this one. So what we're going to do here is I'm just going to throw these connections at you, all right? And we're going to go from start to finish to a certain point. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to analyze Hopper and Elle and then some other characters when we hear certain things. But we're going to go from, like, say, chapter 1 and onward, okay? And I believe we're going to get right to the end of chapter 3, okay? And then in chapter 4, I have a theory, another Kali theory that we're going to come out, and that's going to be our next one. And trust me, that one, I don't know. That's going to raise some questions to a lot of people, but that one's going to be very interesting as well. But let's get right into this. So the very first thing we see, okay, as a connection to, say, the lost sister of Kali, is right when we first ever meet 11, okay, in the junkyard when she's training. If we think about this symbolically, okay, when we first see 11 actually training in a junkyard type of place is in season 2, okay, when we see Kali training with 11 at the rail yard, which is basically a junkyard for rail cars. So our connection was there the very first second we ever saw 11 in this season, which is mind-blowing, okay? But this connection we wouldn't have known about until we actually are about to meet Kali, and there's a reason for that. But this is when Hopper, okay, is at the cabin, okay, and he's talking to Joyce, and this is after him and 11 are kind of butting heads about stuff. And basically, after Joyce leaves, what we see Hopper do is he goes to this little secret nook behind the wall, and it reveals this bomb vest, okay? At this moment, you may or may not have picked up on that. That's what this was. I did not. I kind of thought it looked like bombs, but I didn't think it was a bomb vest specifically, okay? But my point is is, if you think about the symbolism here, Hopper uncovers a secret behind a wall, and that connects to a bomb. So that's all I'm going to leave you with. We're going to talk about that later. Let me know your thoughts so far. However, okay, as we continue, as we get to this next scene, all right, with Nancy and Eleven at the Wheeler house when they come across Karen on the floor, all right. Initially in the trailer breakdown, we had a connection, okay, referred to Mama specifically, and that connected from Holly running up to Karen. It was almost exactly the same as when we see Eleven run up to Mama in Mama's flashback when they meet. But the thing about that is how we're trying to find the lost sister connections here, all right? We get led into that, and we get led into that being used by this Mama being Karen, all right? Because as they're on the floor, right, what Nancy's doing is basically kind of what we see Aunt Becky end up doing in Mama's flashback, where she's saying, just hold on, they're on their way, help's coming soon, all right? It's almost the exact same thing. But what Nancy does here, people, is she basically tells Eleven to leave because they see the gate at the front door and they hear Holly screaming. But symbolically, people, what she's telling her to do is to leave to go find the lost sister. If you see what I'm trying to do here, all right? And now that we know Eleven is on her journey to go finding the lost sister, this is where the connections are going to come in big time, all right? Not just to refer to the lost sister, but a lot to do with our girl Mama as well. And you know how passionate I am about Mama coming back. Well, if Kali came back, okay, the only reason we know who Kali is because of Mama. So no doubt in my mind, we might be onto something. We might have been onto something since pretty much the beginning of this channel, which is phenomenal. But let me know your thoughts so far. Because this next scene is actually when Lucas, okay, he's talking to Nancy and Mike at the hospital after everything has happened. And this is when he starts saying, I don't believe in coincidences anymore. And it made me start thinking hard that these coincidences that we sometimes feel most likely probably are going to end up being true, as long as the proof is there. But what he mentions, all right, is he mentions November 3rd, all right, the date that this is happening on, and then he tries to connect it to the fact that Will vanished on the 6th, all right? But if we think, okay, in season 2 is more prominent to the date of November 3rd and not season 1 when Will vanishes on November 6th. That's very important here. And what we get in season 2 is when Owens, specifically, I hope he comes back as well, but when he starts talking to Hopper and Joyce, all right, about the anniversary effect, and that's what's affecting Will, all right? If we think about that in this scenario, the anniversary of November 3rd going into the 4th is pretty much the time frame of when Eleven actually goes and runs away and she meets Mama and then ends up meeting Kali, is right around the time frame of November 3rd to going into the 4th. If you did not put those pieces together, that's more prominent to this date than actually the vanishing of Will Byers, which is phenomenal, okay? And specifically on this date is now the vanishing of the lost sister being Holly Wheeler. So therefore, the connections are there, people, but let's just keep going with this because the next scene, all right, is actually a connection to Nancy when she was the lost sister, and this is when we see Eleven in the Upside Down hiding behind the tree as she's tracking the Demogorgon. Well, you might be confused. Why is Nancy the lost sister? Well, if you think back, okay, we get another Mama connection here, and the reason being is because in season 1, when Nancy ends up becoming the lost sister when she comes into the Upside Down, kind of like Eleven just did here, all right, she hides behind the tree from a Demogorgon who's tracking her, and basically that happens within the monster episode, okay, and that is actually the very first episode we were ever revealed to Mama because of Jim Hopper, who was about to be seen by Eleven and ends up getting thrown across by the tree. But my point being here is the connections are there, people, if you remember how the show has played out. But let me know your thoughts so far. Let's keep going, because as Hopper gets thrown, okay, and basically he comes to and he sees that Eleven's in front of him, no doubt in my mind how he comes off. He goes, "How are you here?" All right? This was a piggyback reference, no doubt in my mind. And it made me think, if we're trying to find a connection to Kali and the lost sister here, all right, how does that connect back? Well, in the piggyback episode, if you really think about it, okay, Max is also a lost sister, okay, because she was the sister of Billy. So in that moment, she is the lost sister. But what I mean by this is when Vecna is about to curse Max in the snowball, okay? When we first see this, before 11 walks in, she does her high moment, which also connects to when we first are revealed to Max in this season, which is phenomenal. But when 11 comes in and she throws Vecna at the wall, okay, through the bleachers or whatever, basically she runs up to Max, she picks her up, and Max is all confused the same way Hopper is, and she goes, "How are you here?" And she goes, "Are you real?" and starts poking her face. That's when 11 has the whole scene where she's like, "I piggyback from a pizza dough freezer," all right? Well, if you I thought about this scene, how Hopper comes off is he's like, "How are you here?" And he's like all confused. And then I thought deeper, okay, how does this connect to Kali? Well, the very first time we ever meet Kali in the Lost Sister episode, okay, when 11 and her are talking on top of the roof in Chicago, and 11 starts asking her about her powers, or Kali starts showing her about her powers with the butterfly, right? Kali starts to describe their powers kind of like magic, okay? And oddly enough, the episode we get Kali revealed to us in is Sorcerer, okay? Which no doubt in my mind is a strong reference towards magic. So the connections are there, people. Let me know your thoughts. But the funny thing about this whole scene about how are you here and are you real, okay? That's what 11 says to Kali right after that. She starts poking her face and she goes, "Are you real?" And so that connection has been there all the way from season 2. And that's probably right around the same day as November 3rd to the 4th. Exactly the same anniversary of what is happening on this day. It's fucking fascinating. Let me know your thoughts. Because as we get to this next scene, people, this is when Hopper and 11 are kind of in a little bit of an argument, all right? And when's the last time we saw Hop and 11 have a little bit of an argument? All the way back in season 2 when Hop and 11 were living together in the cabin, okay? Which ends up resulting, all right, with 11 running away, all right? So just think about that, where that all entails. She runs away, she goes to her mama's house, and then she ends up finding the lost sister, her being Kali, all right? But how he's saying, he's like, "How did you get here?" And he's asking, "Did you take the tunnels?" Right? The very first time we ever meet Kali, people, this is fascinating. God, they're trying to get away from the police, correct? And Kali basically tells her driver to go take the tunnels, all right? So the connection is there, once again, to Kali, all the way back in season 2. But the funny thing is there's more of a connection here. It's like how he's asking how she got here, and then she says, "Oh, Nancy drove me." Like it's no big deal. This connects to when Hop and Elle actually reunite, how they just reunited in this scene, all the way in season 2 when they are on their way to go break in to Hawkins' lab. And as we know, what this mission is about to entail is that they are about to go end up breaking into a lab to go find Kali. So once again, the connections are there, and it's fascinating, people. But the funny thing about that scenario is what I mean by when they reunited in season 2 is when they're on that drive and he's asking, "Well, where did you go?" And she says, "I went to my mama's house." And he starts saying, "Well, how did you get there?" And she says, "A nice man in a big truck." And Hopper's all freaked out about that shit. And then he starts mentioning, okay, he's like, "And that's where you got those clothes too. What, your Aunt Becky dressed you in that stuff?" And that's referred to our girl Kali. And in that scene, okay, back in season 2, 11 never mentions Kali to Hopper, not once. And we don't know anything about that. If she's ever mentioned Kali to anybody, we know, we get a little bit in hints that she has mentioned her mom to her friends, at least Will and Mike specifically. And we know that she has mentioned those things about her mom, but not her sister. So that's very interesting to this and how that scene entails and how it connects back to this scene in season 5. I love it. Just keep letting me know your thoughts about this. There's so much going on here, but I love it. And I'm so happy about this Kali thing. That's why I wanted to put this theory out first more than anything. Because as this continues, people, we start hearing 11. She starts describing. She says, "Well, if the Demogorgon can lead us to Holly, then that can lead us to Vecna." All right? Well, how we're thinking of Holly and referring to Holly as the lost sister specifically, if we think about the symbolism here, 11 basically just said that the Demogorgon will lead to the lost sister, which will eventually lead us to Vecna. And that's exactly how this show has entailed, people. Season 1 was Demogorgon. Season 2, we first ever meet Kali, and that's how it starts. And then we get Mind Flayer, which eventually leads us to Vecna. That's exactly what this line shows us right here. It's awesome. I'm loving this season 5 and how these connections can just be connected directly if you remember how the show entails. But Once Hopper starts getting irritated, okay, that's another example, all right, when 11's being stubborn, okay, in season 2 when they start getting in arguments like that, and that results in 11 running away once again. And the reason, the very first time we see 11 run away, okay, is when she actually goes to the school, and that's the day that Will gets infiltrated by the Mind Flayer, right, I believe on November 1st. So, you got to think about that, people, is that in that moment, we get a same scene here, is how she walks away after he's all irritated and he's like kind of just like talking shit. She goes, not emotion, instinct, and just walks away with passion. In that scene back in season 2, when she goes to the school and jumps over the tripwire, okay, which later happens with Lucas, okay, in the turnboat trap. But when she goes to the school, she kind of looks the same way and she goes, not stupid. All right. And that was their big thing in season 2, that they're not stupid. Okay. They're not going to do stupid things. And that's kind of 11 is acting on instinct. And that's what happens in the next scene. Okay. So let me know your thoughts so far. But as we get to this next scene, what I mean by 11's acting on instinct, I mean they kind of talk about it within this scene. And Hopper kind of starts talking about it, how to maybe not act on instinct. And what he starts describing is this is what leads into his conversation about his daughter, which is extremely emotional and phenomenal writing. Thank you for putting that scene in. It was amazing. Just the connection between 11 and Hopper and him really opening up to her about his daughter. We never really saw that too much, okay? Not like this specifically, where he actually starts crying. And you can see the seriousness of what Hopper is kind of planning here, and we don't really know that, okay, until it gets to the point of right before they meet Kali. But if you think about the build up to this, it's very serious and very emotional. I love it. But the main thing about this scene is when they're at the tracks and 11 ends up realizing that Hopper's wounded because he got grazed by a bullet, okay? He ends up hiding that vest, so she hasn't seen it yet. But my point is that he starts talking about how when he was younger, he started to be, he was really stupid and reckless, how he thought he was smarter than his father, he wouldn't listen to his father, that his father just basically made him enlist in the war, okay, to try and teach him a lesson, and that basically that he thought he was smarter than everybody, especially his officers, okay? But the thing about that is it started making me think because of what 11 says here. She basically says, so that's why you don't want me here, is that you think Vecna will win and that I will die. And I started thinking, okay, what's the lost sister connection here? And I started thinking about what Hopper says, is that maybe this might be something that we see Kali and 11 have a conversation later in this season, when after they have now reunited. Maybe 11 or Kali might apologize to 11 for how she used to act, and that it put her in risk and put her life in danger because now she is basically ends up being a lab rat and she got caught, okay? So that's the thing about this, is that being stupid and reckless and acting on instinct could end up getting you where she's at, or even worse, dead, okay? And that's kind of what Hopper's kind of hinting at here, is that these things can lead to this by just acting out like this and not thinking about what you're doing. So it made me think, the last time we see Kali in 11, okay, when she's yelling Jane, Jane, and 11 ends up deciding to go back to Hawkins' lab, Kali's trying to keep her from there, and it's always come off like, okay, why is she trying to keep her away from her friends? But was she not trying to keep her away from her friends, and was she trying to keep her safe because she's worried that if she goes back there, that Vecna will win and she will die, okay? So you get the drift here, is that that's the deep hidden connection here. And that's, if you know Kali and you have watched that episode and you're a fan of Kali, you would know that, all right? So I'm so happy I've been passionate about this character because these connections are there and that this is a major part of this final season. It blows my mind. But as we continue, this is a very important part, people. This is when they come across the wall. All right. And if you know right away, the minute we saw this wall, even back in the trailers and the teasers, we were talking about the fact that the first time we ever see a big wall is referred to Kali. And that's actually right before her and 11 leave. OK, or they leave each other for the last time. So basically, we see Kali to put up as a distraction to the police what they're getting shot at. Okay, she puts up a big ass iron wall. Okay, so we know Kali is associated with walls, but that's the thing, is we don't know if she's associated with this wall, and that's what I want to know your guys' thoughts about. Is do you think Kali has any involvement with, say, the military and them using her to create this wall? All right, that's going to be a part of the next theory, but I want to know your thoughts about that. Because as they get to this wall, 11 starts talking. She finds Holly's shoe, and then she starts thinking about this. So if we think about this a little bit deeper here, when she finds this piece of the lost sister, she refers it to the wall, okay? She says that Holly was here, so the lost sister was here, and if you took, and then she says it took her through the wall, okay? So that's the thing that's confusing, is that this is where I think we're getting the separation between Holly in the symbolism of her being the lost sister and now Kali. Because as we know, all right, they're on two separate sides of the wall. So that is the separation between the connection as well. Now, Kali is on this inside portion where 11 and Hopper actually are, and they're going to be led to her, but they can't get through the wall to get to the other lost sister and get those answers yet, because those are being answered in other things. So if you see the symbolism here, it's extremely symbolic in this season 5 so far with how they're connecting things, and it's leading in directly. It's almost direct if you know the show enough. And that's the thing, is it's so deep that unless you ever rewatched the show, and that's why they're probably hinting at rewatch, like, no doubt in my mind, there's reasons for that, because they're leaving things more symbolic and more theoretical in a sense for us to figure out as fans, because that's the fun of this show. But as we continue this, all right, basically 11 saying, okay, maybe she can't find her because she's behind the wall, all right? Symbolically, if you think about that, it's basically saying maybe she can't find Holly because the lost sister is behind the wall, okay? So it makes me think, even in a symbolic sense, could Kali have something to do with this wall, or being forced to make this wall, all right? But how I wanted to hold off a little bit about what Hopper found, or what we see Hopper see in the very beginning of the season, okay, when he pulls out the bomb vest from behind the wall. That's now a connection to a bomb being a secret behind the wall, all right? And now we're getting connection to the lost sister being trapped behind the wall, or being involved with the wall. So now there's a connection to the bomb and to the lost sister. The only thing I'm going to tell you is the very first time we ever meet Kali, people, when she makes that tunnel crash down, one of Kali's key lines, people, all the way back in the beginning of season 2, is when she makes that tunnel go down, she goes, boom. All right. And that is a bomb reference, if you ask me. So we know that there's going to be a big bada bada boom moment coming up that has not happened yet. Do you guys think Kali is going to be the one that has something to do with the big boom that we see on the top of Hawkins' lab? Just let me know your thoughts about that. But as we get to this next one, this is where things are going to get wild. Because as we have been getting these connections and using Holly and using Hopper and 11 as this reference, we come back to when Nancy and Mike are at the hospital. And this is actually the scene, all right, when we see that they are going to try to go undercover to try and go talk to their mom to get some truth, right? So, therefore, when they get into that room and they're talking to Karen, okay, the mama, all right, symbolically, basically they're asking her about Holly. They tell her that Holly is now missing, or has become the lost sister, all right, and she starts saying that maybe they know who it is, being Mr. What's-It, okay? So as they ask her to describe him, all right, if the lost sister has described anything about Mr. What's-It, right? And she describes a pocket watch, she describes a vest, and then she says gentle and kind. And I started thinking about this as kind of how Robin does her code in the beginning of this season. I started thinking about the context clues here, how I talk about all the time in the theories, how the context clues are everything, people. But if you think about the context clues here, if you take out pocket, all right, and you just use the term watch, all right, and then the next thing is a vest. That term and that reference, like a little puzzle, is now watch the vest to someone who is gentle and kind. And no doubt in my mind, Hopper in this scenario, how we first see him in the beginning of this season 5, he's trying to be this gentle and kind individual and father-like person to 11. And you could see that. He tries to ignore the fact that she's stressed out. He tries to say, oh, let's go watch a Miami Vice marathon, all right? And he's trying to ignore it. He's trying to be gentle and kind. All right, but the pocket watch in the vest, all right, the watch vest specifically, as we've been getting hints to the secret behind the wall being the bomb vest, all of these connections are here, people. It's just a matter of finding how they connect, all right? But the last thing I'm going to leave you with, and I hope you guys like this first theory back, But this is going to connect our girl Mama, because no doubt in my mind, the fact that Kali has returned, and I'm so excited once again, no doubt in my mind, Mama's got to come back. The only reason we know who Kali is because of Mama. And if they're kind of going in a reverse manner, it would make sense that we saw Kali first before we now see Mama. So I'm really hoping that in this next episode, or at least by Escape from Camazotz, we see Mama again, no doubt in my mind. I'm really, really hoping. But this next line, we're going to think of symbolically, because we see Nancy and Mike, and they say, well, has Holly, the lost sister, ever told you a name? And she writes the name Henry, as we know. And that was a huge moment in the show. I was so excited to see how they portrayed that moment. It was phenomenal, okay? But if we think about this symbolically, and what I'm going to leave you with, is basically she just said that the lost sister told Mama about Henry, okay? So put those pieces together, that the lost sister told Mama about Henry. And all I'm going to say, people, is what I'm going to leave you with actually on this, is I'm going to leave you with this thought, is if you've watched my channel, you know I am extremely passionate about two characters more than anything. It's being Mama returning and Kali returning. And we got one of those. So if Mama returns, which I think, could Mama have any involvement with Henry Creel? And in a deeper meaning, possibly being involved like a lost sister. And you know from my other theories that I truly believe Mama is going to end up being Alice Creel in one way or another. And these lines connect here. And even if we're looking at Holly, if we watch this season so far, who is Holly representing, okay? And we use Holly to find these connections being the lost sister. But if you think about who Holly is basically representing in Henry Creel's mindset, or Vecna's mindset, wherever she's actually at, Camazotz, all right, she is basically referencing Alice Creel. So the connection's there in one big link, right? I'm going to blow your mind one more time, though. You want to know something about this, why I think Alice Creel could be Mama even more? Because if we think about the hidden link here, the very first time we ever hear about Terry Ives is actually in season 1, referred to Hopper, who's investigating all of this and trying to uncover secrets. And that happens to be in the Holly Jolly episode. All right. So the connections are there as a link straight up. Now that we have gotten season 5, I hope you guys like this one. I was mind blown when I started to pick up on these hints, but just let me know your thoughts. I hope you guys like this one. I'm happy to be back. We're going to be going right into another Kali theory, which you may or may not like based off the title. I'm not going to tell you what it is. That one should be out and ready for Friday, but let me know your thoughts. It's your boy Brandon, DLA Alternative. Keep subscribing, liking, hyping, and doing all that good jazz. I love each and every single one of you, and you guys already know we out.